first I would like to thank the organizer to give me an opportunity to present some of our work. And as it has been introduced that I am a catalysis person, and I have done some work on sensing, and actually the sensing is actually related to the catalysis because both are interlinked with each other. So that is what we could able to do some work on sensing. But most of our work is actually based on the design of the materials, how they can be useful in sensing applications. So before I start giving, actually today we have around 110 slides. In 110 slides, I have put 50 slides for the material synthesis part because just now I saw that you have already been experienced with several kind of characterization technique, and you also have been experienced with several kind of sensing techniques, I hope, in the last 6-7 days. So I will take this freedom and I won't discuss much on the electroanalytic techniques for the sensing application and the characterization, because otherwise this talk will become too long. So I will restrict myself to the different kind of synthesis of the material, and I am going to apply the same material for the sensing application. So first 50 slides for the synthesis part, and remaining 70 slides or 60 slides, something like that, for the sensing application. So with that, I'm going to start. So the first thing is that why we need the material at the nanoscale, because the specific properties of the material on the nanoscale can be used for the catalysis, sensors, biosensor, and because of their development, you can develop various new technology required for the modern society. And we know that a variety of nanoporous material you can develop, which have high surface area, surface charge, and size. They can be prepared either by top-down and bottom-up approach. So what is the top-down and bottom-up approach? I think if you are not knowing very clearly, I will just say that when you are starting from the molecular precursor, then you are making a material to a bottom-up approach, because you are starting from molecular precursor and you are making the material up to nanometer scale and whatever the micrometer scale. Top-down approach means you have already synthesized some material and now you are doing some post-synthesis modification so that you can achieve the required activity. That is what is the top-down approach. So generally based on these two approaches, one can design and develop different kind of material. Okay, and whenever we are thinking about material, material can be non-porous or porous. Whenever you have porosity in the material, then you have better activity. I will discuss that point little later in my following slides. And then, since the porous material has several selenol group, and you can have ability to functionalize depending upon your requirement, so it can interact with several biomolecule or pharmaceutical molecule or any kind of molecule present in inorganic and organic molecule present in water bodies. So they can be used in several applications, especially medical, clinical, and other technological applications. So that is what this porous material can offer. And based on pore size, these porous materials are classified in 3 categories: microporous, mesoporous, and macroporous. Microporous are material for which the pore size are less than 2 nanometer. Specifically, I would say that their pore size is close to 1 nanometer or so. Mesoporous is the range of 2 to 50 nanometer, and macroporous in the range of greater than 50 nanometer. So these are the classification based on their pore diameter. So one can design these nanoporous material based on various approaches, as I discussed before, that you can do top-down and bottom-up approach, but you also require different kind of precursors and templates. Because why the template is important? Because you want to generate a pores. In order to generate a pores, you require a specific kind of template. So we have wide variety of porous material that can be classified as inorganic porous material, for example, zeolite, silica, and so on. Organic porous material, for example, you have organic polymers and so on. And then inorganic organic porous materials, that is metal organic framework that you can consider, or you can in fact make a composite of both inorganic and organic porous material based on your requirement. And because their surface has different kind of moieties, so they can interact very well with atoms and liquid and gas molecules, so they can exhibit good sensing ability for the required analytes. So that is what we need to tailor its porosity. And when we think about the material, what we need is that we want material which are very simple to synthesize, and it should be very cheap. So that is what, and it should be highly robust in nature. So that is what transition metal oxide, zeolites, which are very much, you can make it very easily. They are of very high importance. So whenever we are synthesizing a material, especially the nanoporous material, for the sensing application, what are the things one should keep in mind? The first thing, that it should be easy to synthesize, and whenever you want and whatever scale you want, it should be possible to scalable and reproducible synthesis. Then you can have the economical catalyst precursor or economical precursor through which you are getting this material, that should be there. You should have low deactivation phenomena. Deactivation phenomena means whenever you are using this material for sensing application, after several times it gets deactivated. So you don't want them to deactivate. You want them for active for longer time, so that it should not exhibit any deactivation phenomena. It should give similar sensitivity and similar analytical ability. And the material, if it's possible to recover and recycle, that is the best. Otherwise, one has to discard the material and you have to prepare fresh material. And since we are going to use them for several sensing applications, so it should be easily fabricatable in terms of thin film and so on. So, and during that process, its porosity and reactivity should not lose. Because general what happens whenever we are fabricating these material for our desired purpose in terms of sensing application, most often its porosity and reactivity loses, because you are going to use some binder, you are going to use some adhesive and so on, that may interfere with the reactivity of the catalyst. So that is what one has to be little careful when we are developing the, so in fact the sensor fabrication itself is a very, very challenging task. So now, keeping that in mind, the present talk today is based on electrochemical sensor. So just a brief overview I will give for electrochemical sensor. So what we are going to see in our coming slide is that we are going to use either amperometric sensor, potentiometric sensor, or impedance-based sensor to detect various analyte based on this nanostructure material. And we are going to use mostly 3 electrode system, which have a working electrode, reference electrode, and counter electrode. I think these are all things anybody who has already presented in terms of electrochemical sensor, you must be knowing about it. And since we are going to work on nanomaterial, so the sensitivity and amplification in the current response can be very high. So we need to have, we need to detect in very low, very high sensitivity. So it means that the material should be, your instrument should be very, very sensitive enough to detect those analytes. So we will see what are the various advantages of these nanomaterial in our future slides. So with this, we can detect any kind of small molecule, either chemical, vitamins, amino acid, even pesticides, or even toxic metals present in the water body. I am going to give you various examples in this presentation where we can see how these nanomaterials can be used for all these kind of biomolecules. And then if you use the low surface area material, then what is the problem is there that you have high overpotential, low electron transfer kinetics, even sometimes conductivity is the issue, mass transfer is the major issue in those. So that can be prevented if you have material with nanocrystalline and porous in nature. So that's what porosity and high surface area materials are very important. And you can, when you can modify these electrode with the nanocrystalline material, then this problem can be overcome. Okay. So,
hello, excuse me, sir.
Yeah.
Slide not changing, sir.
Slides?
Slide not changing, sir.
Slide is not changing.
No, sir.
Is it changed, or I am talking about the detection of a small molecule? It is changed.
It's a small molecule slide.
Yes.
You can.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Carry on, sir. Carry on. Carry on, sir. Sorry, sir.
Okay. So yeah. So now I change the slide. So generally what happened, the electrochemical methods I am going to discuss today is actually why I am using, because it can give you the accurate monitoring of the environmental sample, food samples and pathological samples. That is why we are going to use this electrochemical technique, and they can use for the concentration of analyte, detection of one or more analyte, because what happened, sometimes you need to detect more than one analyte in one go. So that is that time electrochemical sensor becomes very important. It is mostly based on the redox process of the analyte as well as the redox process of your material. And then in this process, it should have better diffusion coefficient. It should have overcome the electron transfer rate, process it, or it should have better electron transfer rate. So all those things is possible when you have the nanoporous materials. So these are the basic introduction towards what I am going to discuss, and I am going to discuss mostly based on voltammetric technique, which entails the measurement of current versus applied potential, amperometric techniques, which give you the information about current time curve at fixed potential, and then we also use the square wave voltammetry, which I am going to discuss, because sampling another thing, you can use very small amount of sample, and the detection limit will be very good. So that is why these electrochemical techniques have advantages over several other techniques which are known in the literature. So based on this, what we will do, most of our today's discussion is mostly related to metal oxide and zeolites and their nanocomposite materials. So these materials are actually deposited on the glassy carbon electrode in most of the cases, and then it is used for the sensing application. So with this brief introduction about the material and why these materials are I have chosen for this particular application and what kind of electroanalytical technique I am going to use, I have put this slide so that the audience will be well aware that what I am going to talk. So now I am going to say that since many of the analytes and your material which we have is actually sensing based on the redox property. Redox property means either it can give oxidation or it can reduction. So in order to get that redox property, you need to get some metal. So how can you implant metal? The implant metal means either you can take metal nanoparticle dispersed in some solvent, or you can take metal oxide directly. Or if you have a, let's say, clay material or certain exchange material where you can exchange the ion with respect to the desired metal. So for example, I have sodium, I replace with iron. So I get the activity because of iron. So that possibility, that flexibility will be there if the material is ion exchange. Then it is very important to choose a right impregnation method in order to implant your metal and metal oxide. Impregnation methods are generally two types: wet impregnation method and incipient wet impregnation method. In wet impregnation method is there, if you want to load your metal nanoparticle or metal oxide, you just take disperse into water and then you add, or you can take metal precursor, add your porous material and then dry it, and then either you reduce it or you calcine it, you get that metal oxide or metal nanoparticle supported on the material. But if you want that specifically this implant or this metal goes and sit in the pores, then you cannot do like this. In that case, you have to use incipient wet impregnation method. In that, first you need to know that what is the pore size of that material, pore volume of that material. So what you will be doing, after measuring the surface area, you will get to know the pore volume of that material, and then you try to dissolve your metal precursor in that particular amount of the solvent, so that because of the capillary action, this metal will go inside into the pores, and then you can do either calcination or reduction. You will get the metal implanted inside the pore. So you can get even better selectivity because it is not present on the surface. So such kind of thing one can do when you, and it depends what kind of application you are looking for. Then it comes some method of functionalization. Functionalization, how you want. For example, yeah, it is not there. Functionalization means you want to anchor it or you want to graft it. So if there is direct, for example, you are having silica and you are grafting metal, so it should have SiO_M bond directly. That is called grafting. If you want to functionalize or anchor it, then it has to be linked through some spacer, some organic spacer has to be there. So that is called the anchoring. So there are two methods of functionalization, either grafting or anchoring. And sipping bottle actually is not required in this particular case. So I just leave it that. So here I just want to say that why porous material is important when compared to the flat material. Because when you think about the porous material, it will have additional external surface, it will have additional porosity. So when you are dealing with porous material, you will have a large surface, additional large surfaces. So you will have the large surface area, mostly external surface area. So that have the advantage in terms of sensing, because analyte can easily interact with the surface. So that is why your porous material plays very important role. You can have metal oxide, zeolite, MOF, and carbon nitride, all these kind of porous material we have. But today I am mostly restricting myself to metal oxide and zeolites. So why metal oxide and zeolite? In case of sensing application, the thing is that when you think about the metal oxide, you have a particular metal, you can tune its redox property depending upon your requirement. And moreover, metal oxide also has a good conductivity. But in case of silica-based zeolite, it doesn't have good conductivity. So what you want, you need to improve the conductivity, so that we will see how we can improve the conductivity. But this is the important thing, because zeolite has an ion exchange capacity. So you can implant ion whatever you want. So the conductivity can be improved. Okay, so now I am taking to you in terms of synthesis, how you actually synthesize material. Maybe this few slides will be very useful for the beginners, especially the research scholar who are listening this talk. So when we think about the precipitation, what we have in our mind is that we add some metal precursor and we add some precipitating agent and we got precipitate. But it's not very straightforward method, and it is not that you can easily see them and you can easily tell that this is the thing which you form, because it is not unlike organic chemistry. When you do organic chemistry, what happens, you can actually see how one molecule is interacting with other molecule and give you the different product, because you can easily see them. But in case of inorganic synthesis, it's not easy, because initial precursors which are formed, which are actually in the highly dispersed state, and you cannot actually isolate them and see them through the any kind of a spectroscopic technique. It is possible, but it is very difficult. So that is why it is very difficult to understand the mechanistic pathway through which it is actually forming the material. Okay, most often what we do, we just remove the material at different interval of time after precipitation, so that we can characterize by XRD and so on. But what happens into the mother gel or mother liquor in the solution state, it is difficult to monitor. So that is what these are various steps which takes place when you take metal solution. It's first by hydrolysis, and this thing is precipitate, then you age it, then it get you filter, then dry, and then calcine. So you can get a different shape, and you can calcine, you can get a different kind of required material. So how it actually happening? So it's actually depending upon the nucleation. Okay, so for example, this is your metal ion. If you see the on the top of that, you are seeing that metal ion concentration is decreasing. And actually, when you are starting the synthesis, nucleus is formed. So actually, every synthesis is actually based on what is that? You are having some induction period. That induction period is actually related to the nucleation formation. So once the nucleus form, then the growth takes place and you get the precipitate. So this shaded area which I am seeing is the shaded area where you get the maximum nucleation done, and this is the time where your growth is started taking place. Okay, so precipitate is started taking place. So initially you won't have any precipitate up to certain amount of time. Nothing is there, because nucleation is taking place. Once you get the sufficient nucleus, then this nucleus interact with each other, aggregates, and then you get the precipitate. And once the precipitate size is more than the size, so that it can gravitationally separate, so then only you can see the precipitate. Otherwise, it will be in the gel state. So that is how you can monitor the progress of your precipitate. Okay, so there are various parameters which influence the synthesis. So if you say that I can change the pH, or I can change the aging, or I can change the additive, every parameter actually influence. So it is very difficult to, because this particular slide itself will take maybe about 10 minutes to discuss. But I am just taking the liberty that you must be having this information, that all these factors contributes toward the formation of a particular kind of precipitate having a desired property. So mostly your porosity and the surface area, it depend upon the additives, temperature, and kind of precursor you are using. Sometimes even solvent plays an important role. How much you are actually want to take solvent, you are taking more or less. That will also give you the high surface area or low surface area material. So everything actually influence the precipitate quality and property. The next very important thing is the sol gel. So whatever the previous thing I discussed is not, it was not the sol gel, it was precipitate, direct precipitate. But how do you difference between sol gel and precipitate? Because in precipitate you get direct precipitation without forming any sol and gel. But here you get a sol means you have a clear solution in which you are only having some dimeric and trimeric species. So it is a solution which is quite clear in nature. Okay. Then when you keep it for some time, then what happens? It can form a gel, or it can flocculate. Generally, flocculation takes place in terms of template. If you don't use template, mostly you will get the gel. What is gel? Gel is nothing but the interconnected three-dimensional network structure in which you have solvent encased in it. So that is what you have a gel. You can say a hydrogel or alcohol depending upon whether you are using water as a medium or alcohol as a medium. And then when you get the gel, you can dry it in two methods. Either you can just dry, air dry, you will get the zero gel, or you can dry using a particular solvent, for example, supercritical carbon dioxide or supercritical water, then you will get the material which is aerogel, because now in the gel you have some air or gas entrapped into it. That is why it is called aerogel. So these two methods, generally most often we use zero gel for the synthesis of sensing materials. So what are the technique in the sol gel or in precipitation happen? Initially, suppose you are taking some silica precursor, it can either use acidic catalyst or basic medium, anything it can take. For example, if you take acid, you get the, if you starting with SiOR4, now you get one hydrolyzed species SiOH and 3 OR is there. This is monomeric species. It can also happen in presence of base, you get the same thing. But what will be the difference if you are doing acid and base? I will show you in the next slide. Okay, it is not necessary that you can have either silica or metal. You can have a different kind of precursor. It can ultimately leads to you OH species only, whatever method you are using, because each OH species can condense and give you dimer and trimer and so on. For example, in this case, so if you see that the second step, when you have the OH species, it can react with the another OH or OR species and it form the dimer. Similarly, this is in the acid medium, and you can also have in the basic medium, which is given as A and B. Okay, so based on this method, your growth started taking place. Growth starts takes place. So that is what first is monomer, then dimer, then trimer, and tetramer. It takes place, and finally, in presence of inorganic and organic cation, you will get a particular material. Okay, so now, as I said, what is difference between the acidic and basic? There will be a very unique difference, because in acid condition your hydrolysis rate is higher than the condensation rate. In basic condition your condensation rate is greater than the hydrolysis rate. So what happened? These two factors actually contribute towards the controlling the porosity, which is shown in the next slide. If you see here, if you are synthesizing material in the acidic medium, since the hydrolysis rate is higher and condensation rate and growth rate is slower, so what will happen? You will get more branched material. Means you will get material with higher microporosity. Your mesoporosity or intercrystalline porosity will be lower. But when you are preparing material with a basic medium, then your immediate aggregation is taking place because condensation is fast. So then you will get the material with higher porosity. So depending upon your requirement, you can tune either, and you know that silica is a very, very important material you can get a silica species stabilized in acidic medium as well as in basic medium. So you can synthesize material from pH 0 to pH 14. Anything you can prepare with the silica, but it is not possible with other metal. Okay, that is why depending upon the kind of metal you want to incorporate, you have to change the synthesis condition of the silica. Okay, that is what is the important part. So now with this, because when we are thinking about synthesizing of material, you need this basic information about the sol gel and the precipitation method. Now I am coming to a special kind of material, for example, zeolite and silica. Because why I am discussing zeolite, silica and metal oxide? Because I am going to use these materials for the sensing application. So I think many in this audience may not be everyone is aware about the zeolites. So zeolites actually is aluminosilicate, which is microporous aluminosilicate. They have sodium present in their lattice, not in lattice as extra framework species, and you have in the framework silica and aluminium bonded together with each other, and they have unique porosity, and the porosity can be tuned, and you can have a good acid material, and it will be highly a thermal stable material. So if you want to use for gas sensing, that can be done at very high temperature. You can use it, this material, because this material is stable up to 800, 900 degrees centigrade and so on. And you can have a porosity, especially the special kind of porosity. Suppose you want to absorb, sense a special kind of CO2 gas or methane gas, you can do that because you can tailor the pore size. How can you tailor the pore size? That's what you can have, either a small pore zeolite, which is 8-membered ring oxygen channel, which has the pore diameter of 3 to 4.5 angstrom. So most of the small molecule sensing or small molecule interaction or absorption or storage can be done with the small. So generally small pore zeolites are used in gas separation and gas sensing application. Medium pore zeolite having the 10-membered oxygen ring channel have a pore diameter of 4.5 to 6 angstrom. This is good for the small molecule. Okay, for example, benzene and all those kind of molecule, benzene, xylene, such kind of molecule you can use it, or even glucose, fructose, this kind of molecule you can use it for that medium pore zeolite. Large pore zeolite is actually 12-membered ring. It has a pore diameter of 6 to 8 angstrom, and that kind of zeolite is for larger molecule interaction. You can use that. Extra large pore zeolite, you have 8 to 12 angstrom. It has 14-membered ring channel. So depending upon your requirement, you can actually tune. And I think audience may not be knowing, till today there are more than 240 framework of the zeolites are known. So it itself shows its success story, because it's widely used in gas separation, in water purification, and in catalysis. Is used especially in petrol refining industry. Huge zeolites are used. So what is, so as I said in the previous slide, zeolites are highly stable, but actually zeolites, if we think in terms of thermodynamics, zeolite is not a stable material, it is a metastable material. So when you synthesize zeolite from the molecular precursor, which is silica and alumina, you will get a zeolite by using some activation energy, because you know that for any reaction to take place, you require activation energy. You get a zeolite which is a metastable material. It is not a stable material, because if you keep zeolite for longer time, you will get finally quartz or a similar material which are more stable than the zeolite. So in order to get a particular framework or particular zeolite, you need to remove the synthesis after a particular time period. Then only you will get the zeolite, required zeolite. So this is more in a more better way. It is presented here that you have initial, which is called primary building unit, because suppose you have SiOH4 unit and you also have AlOH4 units. When these two units condense, it can form these kind of secondary building unit. Okay, and these secondary building unit, and you know these secondary building unit actually stabilize depending upon the kind of inorganic cation you are using. That is why I said that both inorganic cation and organic, both are structure directing agent. So if you use a smaller cation, it will stabilize a smaller 4x4 or such ring, and if you use larger cation, it will stabilize 6x6 or 6x8 ring. So depending upon the inorganic cation, you can stabilize a particular ring structure, and then this cavity which is formed, this cavity can form based on either inorganic cation or organic cation. So when you have organic cation, they will be stabilizing here, are actually those organic cation. So those organic cation is actually giving you the porosity. So actually, still today, there is, even you can understand that we have 240 framework of zeolite so far known, out of which 40 is naturally occurring zeolite, because nature also produces zeolites. And I think some of you maybe you may get witness that in floating stone and everything you must have seen in Rameswaram and all. That is actually a kind of zeolite which is there. It has porosity, so it is floating on the surface of the water. So there are several natural zeolites are there, but they are not very pure in nature. So in order to get the pure material, you need to synthesize in the lab. And even after so many successful story of the zeolite synthesis, even till today, there is no clear mechanism is established for the zeolite synthesis, because the reason is very simple, because you have so many competing controlling factors for the synthesis of zeolite. That is what is not possible to get a particular framework. And you cannot say that one organic framework can give you 3-4 different kind of zeolite, because other factors also contribute in controlling the nucleation and growth process. So that is why it is very difficult to predict that if I am using this template, I will get this zeolite. It's not possible. So, but based on so many successful development, the following mechanism is proposed, is that you have a cation organic molecule which is surrounded by water. You have silica. It can be silica or SiOAl or SiOM, whatever you can have. It is both are surrounded by water molecule. Then this overlapping of this hydration sphere takes place. You will get the building unit, nucleation takes place, and then crystal growth takes place to give you this kind of zeolite. So this is what the mechanism is proposed, because each step is very complex. It's very difficult to understand. Even you have so many techniques today, but only one such mechanism was established in 1994 in Nature Material. It was published. They have actually given some indirect evidence from solid state NMR about the synthesis of this material. So that is what only one mechanistic approach they have discussed. Okay. So now I have discussed about the microporous material. Now I am coming to mesoporous material. So because the organic template which you have used in case of microporous material cannot be used for the mesoporous material, because you require larger molecule. A smaller molecule, it will give you micropores. You need the larger molecule. So generally, we have a different kind of mesoporous material, mesopores directing agent. For example, you can use this kind of structure directing agent. You can see that. You can use either cationic, large cationic, or anionic, or you have neutral template. So everything can be used for the synthesis of mesoporous silica. I am talking about now mesoporous silica. Okay, and please note that whatever the zeolite I have discussed, it's not possible to. I will discuss in later slide. It's not possible to discuss mesoporous zeolite. It's all microporous. So we have to adopt different strategy. I will discuss that. So these are the structure directing agent which you must be knowing. Actually, they are also known as surfactant. Okay, you can have cationic surfactant, you have anionic surfactant, you have neutral surfactant. All these surfactant can arrange and they can form micelle. You know that different kind of micelle can be formed, and each micelle formation is depending upon the critical micellar concentration. So suppose if you add certain amount of your organic species, they will float here and there. They won't form any micelle. But once you add a particular concentration, then only they form micelle. And you also must be knowing there are two different kind of micelle is there. One is normal micelle and one is inverse micelle. It depends upon the kind of medium you are using and kind of surfactant you are using. Okay. Now this micelle is not static. They can also aggregate and give you different structure. So for example, spherical micelle can aggregate to form rod-like or lamellar-like or bilayer type or cubical type. Such kind of arrangement is possible as soon as you are adding more and more CMC. So CMC for spherical micelle is different. CMC for rod-like micelle is different. CMC for hexagonal, it is different. Okay. Then CMC for lamellar is different. For every architecture is different. So is it possible that we can predict something? Yes, there is a mathematical calculation. There is a certain guideline which is based on many after evaluating many these things. So one can ask that how can I know about this micelle formation? You can use the dynamic light scattering technique in order to get to know, because different micellar formation will diffract light differently. So based on the diffraction of the light, during the dynamic like scattering, you can get to know about the formation of a special kind of micelle. And there is a parameter which can tell you whether you are getting one kind of micelle or other kind of micelle. That information you can get. That parameter is known as packing parameter, which is actually G value, which is equal to V upon A naught into L. V is the volume of the surfactant hydrophobic chain. And if you are using any co-solvent, that can also act as a structure guiding agent. For example, in case of KIT6 today, I am not giving you that example. You need to have CTMABR or something plus butanol. So that butanol acts as a co-solvent. If you don't use butanol, you won't get that particular structure. So that is what is the called co-solvent. So if you have to add both volume of both of them, then effective head group area. For example, you are taking N-ethyl or N-propyl, so that head group will change. So that area you have to take into account, and the kinetic surfactant tail length. So whatever the surfactant you are taking, that length you have to take into account. And if you put in that formula, you will get different kind of value. So if the value is less than 1/3, you will get cubic or 3D hexagonal structure. If the value is lie between 1/3 to N1/2, then it will be 2D hexagonal, and so on. So so more curvature means G is if you have more curvature, then you will get the cubic and hexagonal. If you have less curvature, then you will get the lamellar structure. This is your lamellar type. So depending upon kind of head group, depending upon chain length and so on, you can vary the G value, and based on that you can predict that what kind of micellar arrangement it would have been possible within the mother liquor. So that kind of information you can get it. So now, having this information, I am going to tell you how you prepare the mesoporous silica. So mesoporous silica actually prepared in 1992 because you know that when you take silica, you can just put water, and then if you put acid or base, you will get the silica nanoparticle. But you don't get porosity. So in order to get the porosity, you need to get surfactant. So for example, here in this slide, if you see the micellar, I have used the CTMABR. It can form a micellar. This 5 micelle, if you add more CTMABR, it will arrange the micellar rod. And then if you add more CTMABR, then it will arrange the hexagonal array. Then the silicate will condense above this hexagonal array. This is called the liquid crystal template. Liquid crystal template means in the liquid state, you are getting a kind of an ordered template that is called the liquid crystal template. So then it can give you this silicate arranged over this template, and then when you calcine, then your silicate, your template will go off and you will get the porous material. There is another pathway is that why it will go up to this stage. It can either start from micellar arrangement. So silicate can precipitate here itself at one state, and it can lead to this particular silicate too, and then finally you can get. So there are two pathways exist. Both mechanism exist here for the synthesis of mesoporous silica. This is actually MCM41. You must be knowing this material. Those who are working on sensing using the mesoporous silica, so they actually use this kind of material. So I have already discussed that you can prepare, you can use either anionic or cationic or non-ionic, any kind of template. So actually in case of anionic template or cationic template, you have S plus I minus mechanism or S minus I plus mechanism, which is mostly based on electrostatic interaction. One is prepared in basic medium, another prepared in acidic medium. But when you have non-ionic template, then what will happen? It can also possible through hydrogen bonding. So you can see that in the last one, it is prepared in the non-ionic surfactant. The same hexagonal silica you can get in slightly acidic medium, but mostly it is predominating through hydrogen bonding. And you can also have electrostatic interaction where different cation also present. That can, for example, Cl minus or X, any kind of X minus present, that also interact with each other and form the mesoporous silica. So all these kind of mechanism exist in the synthesis of mesoporous silica. So this is all, whatever I have discussed so far is based on cationic and anionic template. So now the question arises, how, I think this slide will come little late. So I will just, so the question you should have in your mind is that the porosity can be the chain based on chain length. Yes, you are right. So if you are having C16 chain length, you will get one porosity. If you have C18 chain length, you will have another porosity. So you can tune the pore diameter based on the chain length of the surfactant used. So that is what I just wanted to show here through this slide, that yeah, I have changed the side chain length. You can get the different pore diameter. You can see that pore diameter in case of C16, C12, C16, the pore diameter varies between 1 to 1.4, and but once you have using once 18 to 12, 18, then your pore diameter is varying from 1.4 to 1.5 and so on. So your pore diameter you can tune by tuning the surfactant chain length. You can also tune by using the swelling agent. Swelling agent is the agent. See, you get a micelle, no? So micelle, you have a core. If you expand that core, because what happens, suppose you are taking micelle, spherical micelle is formed. So what will happen? Your hydrophobic there inside and hydrophilic group is there outside. Okay, because it's present of water. So the core is having hydrophilic group. Hydrophobic group. So now if you put tetramethyl benzene, 1,3,5 tetramethyl benzene, then what will happen? It will fix inside the hydrophobic domain, and then your core will increase. So when the core will increase, so pore diameter will change. So that also you can use. That is that is also known as swelling agent. So when you use the swelling agent, you can get this. Now this is MCM. So people can ask why I am discussing about different kind of mesoporous silica, same hexagonal. So see, MCM41 was hexagonal, but the problem of the MCM41 is that it is unstable material. When you treat in either somewhat harsh condition, it's not that stable. It is actually why it is not stable, because its wall thickness is very small. It is 1 nanometer also. So you know that you are making a wall of brick. If you can make a brick wall for 4 mm or 9 mm, so 4 mm wall will be smaller than the 9 mm wall. So that is why, so 4-inch wall and 9-inch wall, you know that it is there. So here also it is actually MCM41 synthesis strategy in such a way that your pore wall is actually 1 nanometer thickness. So it is very thin wall. But SBF15, which is prepared using non-ionic surfactant P123, that will have the porosity, that will, because it is synthesized in acid medium, it will have the it will also have the microporosity as well as mesoporosity. Actually, microporosity comes because of this PPO unit, and the polyethylene oxide chain unit, it will give the mesoporosity. So that is the mechanism which has been established for the mesoporous hexagonal SBF15, and here the pore wall thickness is around 9 nanometer. It varies from 6 to 10 nanometer depending upon the synthesis condition. So that is why you can have very strong wall. So that is more stable material. So that is why after 1998, after the discovery of this material, everybody is using SBF15. Everybody is trying to functionalize SBF15 and use them for sensing and catalytic application. We have also used, I will show you in the particular case. So now the question is, so I have discussed about the silica. So can the same principle apply to the metal oxide? No, it is not possible, because silica is highly stable material. You can synthesize from pH 0 to pH 12, but metal oxide is not that, because it is susceptible to hydrolysis, redox reaction, and phase transition. So the synthesis strategy which you have applied for the synthesis of mesoporous silica cannot be extended to the metal oxide. So that is why you have to adopt a different strategy. So you can use soft template and hard template method. I think soft template method already I have discussed, so I am not discussing that in this case. I will be discussing directly hard template method. So this actually, maybe this audience, I am not sure whether you know or not. So hard template method is like, you know, how you make the sweet in Deepavali. You know, you get different kind of architecture, you get different shape. The same way, you can prepare the metal oxide of the required shape, whatever you want. For example, you are starting with mesoporous silica having hexagonal shape. Okay, if you put your metal oxide, metal precursor, it will go and sit into the pores. And then you remove this silica by sodium hydroxide or HF leaching. You will get the metal oxide with the same pore architecture as you have started with the mesoporous. So one has prepared, you can prepare a wide range of metal oxide of required porosity and required crystallographical architecture. So that freedom you have. But the problem with this strategy is that First of all, it's very costly because you are starting with a costly material, that is mesoporous silica or something. And the second thing is that the disadvantage is that you cannot synthesize material in large scale. You can only synthesize material in small scale. That is the disadvantage. So we have developed a unique strategy in which you can prepare the same metal oxide with the same crystallinity, same surface area as they have developed for the hard template method. In this, what we have used, we try to prepare this porous framework, polymer porous framework by organic moiety. So what we did, we take fluoroglycinol, F127 is a non-ionic polymer, and then ethanol and metal nitrate, we put it, then we added SCHO, then it formed a solution, then we have curd it means we have heated it at 373 Kelvin, then we have carbonized it, not heated directly, we have first carbonized it so that the metal carbon bond form, and then we have calcined it so that we get the metal oxide. So with that, we could able to prepare mesoporous cerium oxide with surface area around 150, which is very large. If you prepare cerium oxide, you will get hardly surface area about 5 or so. Similarly, you can see that I can show you here the pore size distribution. You can see that pore size, how it is varying, and this is isotherm. Actually, this kind of technique is used to determine the surface area, porosity, and other thing. Okay. So I can show what I have shown here is when I am using different kind of structure writing agent with F127, I get the better surface area and porosity. That's what I just wanted to show it here. You can use zirconium oxide. Zirconium oxide also we got close to surface area around 200. This kind of the strategy which I have developed, actually this is the total mechanism which you can see. Actually we have used the metal precursor and the polymer, it formed the, this is your precursor, it is fluoroglycinol, it formed the hydrogen bonding with the polymer backbone, and you get this kind of a polymer chain, and then your metal is entrapped in this. When you carbonize it, you get the metal carbon bond present in that, and when you calcine, you get the mesoporous metal oxide. That's what. So yes. Hello.
Oh, sir.
Any disturbance? Hello.
Sir?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is actually I am running out of time. So what I will do, I will skip little bit one or few slides so that I can only say at this stage that whatever the synthesis strategy you have applied for the silica, it is not also possible to apply for the nanocrystalline zeolites. Okay, the reasons just I will show you certain. For example, when you use a special kind of organic cation having the ammonium as well as silane, then only I can get the nanocrystalline zeolites. I will leave it just when I am using additive, I will get a special, because I am going to use this kind of material. So when you are using a special additive, you get a large surface area that I can show you here. For example, in 10 PRTS, you get a very high surface area, 526, external surface area 262. When you are not using any additive, you have very low surface area, especially external surface area. So I am trying to skip it here because this is a recent work which we have done, in which we get the interconnected micropores, mesopores, and macropores. This was the first report where we get all the three interconnected micropores, mesopores, and macropores. So I am leaving it here because now because this audience is mostly for the sensing application. So I am coming with this background. I think you are familiar with that, how to prepare the why these materials are required and how to get the porosity in the material. So now I am coming to the usefulness of these material in sensing application. So remaining 30 minutes I am going to use for the sensing application. So we have in our group, we from 2010 onward up to 2015, we have worked on so many sensing applications. So we started with the glucose sensing because at that time glucose sensing was very hot topic and everybody wanted to develop glucose sensor. So we started with the glucose sensor, and you know that especially in India, many people you will get that they are having the diabetics problem. So everybody want to get a glucose sensor. That is why it is most productive biosensor available in the market. More than 85% of the share it has. And generally your blood sugar has a glucose level in 4.4 to 6.6 millimolar. So that is what the range you have in your blood. So electrochemical detection techniques, we can use it. Actually in the market, whatever the sensor is having, it is actually based on the glucose oxidase enzyme. So we also started with glucose oxidase. What we did, we first prepared the polyethylene. Why we took polyethylene? Because polyethylene is highly conducting in nature. We prepared the porous polyethylene. Generally, polyethylenes are not porous in nature. So we prepared the porous polyethylene using the P123 and SDS. SDS means sodium dodicysulfate. P123 is a block copolymer. Okay, that we have used, and we polymerize the polyethylene. We get, and then finally we remove the surfactant. We get the porous polyethylene. That we have used for the sensing application. So what we did, if you see that this is a cyclic voltammetry for the material prepared with the P123 and without. So this is the dotted line. You see that because of low surface area, its sensitivity is very low. But when you have high surface area, you get the better sensitivity. So you peaks get broaden. You get high current. So we use first this for H2O2 sensing, because you know that I will show you in the next slide that H2O2 is formed when you use the glucose oxidase, and that H2O2 can be oxidized to give you more current. So that is why first we did the H2O2 oxidation, H2O2 sensing, and we could achieve the very good H2O2 sensing mechanism. And then if you see that in case of normal polyethylene, we have the low detection limit and low current response, wherever in case of material prepared with SDS and P123, we have high current response. So that is what this clearly shows that even for H2O2 concentration, H2O2 sensing, it has exhibit the better sensing ability. Now the same material we have used for the glucose sensing. Why? Because when you use glucose, then because of this glucose oxidase present in the polyethylene, it will convert to gluconic acid and H2O2, and that H2O2 can further oxidize to give you more current. So that is what we employed this technique and this mechanism to detect the glucose. So with this, we could able to get the glucose detection in a very good linear range and sensitivity. But our aim is to develop non-enzymatic glucose sensor, because the problem associated with the enzymatic glucose sensing is that your enzymes are not stable all the time. They have certain storage limit. So that's why if you take certain glucose sensor, it has certain up to this many day it will be useful. Otherwise, you need to discard them. So if we can replace with a redox based sensor, that will be better. If you can see here that in case of normal polyethylene and in case of polyethylene with SDS, in case of glucose, its sensitivity is very large. So that's what I just wanted to show in case of amperometry response, and especially with the calibration curve, that how your polyethylene, mesoporous polyethylene have very high current response compared to the normal polyethylene, almost 6 times higher than the normal polyethylene. Now, as I said that we want to develop a non-enzymatic sensor. So non-enzymatic sensor means it should be stable. It will be stable. So we started making copper-based sensor. Copper oxide, we can prepare different morphology, different kind, and we use different kind of additive. For example, different kind of amino acid we have used. Okay, and then we got a very good surface area of copper oxide with a spherical morphology using tyrosine. See, the growth process of the material is actually tailored depending upon how it is interacting with different kind of additive. So in this case, we have also seen its morphology at different interval of time, and we also measure its surface area. What we obtain that when we are using tyrosine, we get the better surface area and the spherical morphology with the flower-like architecture that was exhibited the better activity in terms of glucose sensing. And if you see that this is the normal copper oxide and copper oxide prepared with tyrosine, you can see that again, because of its porosity and surface area, you have the high current response. And again, we have done with H2O2 sensing, and we got good current response for the copper oxide. Then we did with the glucose. You can see that you can measure up to 16 millimolar of glucose, and it can be you have very good response up to 16 millimolar, and it has a LOD of about 20 micromolar. That's what we obtained. So now we want to improve its LOD and sensitivity. So what we did, actually it is working on, in the case of previous case, it was working on glucose oxidase H2O2 formation, but here the mechanism is different. Here actually what happened, you will get the copper oxide is converting to the copper 3 species in situ during the EMF variation. You are varying the potential at 0.6 volt. It will have copper 3 species, which is oxidizing your glucose to this species, CHO species. That is how your oxidation of glucose is happening. Glucose is forming to gluconic acid. Okay. Now we want to increase the sensitivity. See, copper oxide as a surface area, whatever you got, is what you got, the surface area of 39. So it means that I can increase its sensitivity if I disperse this copper oxide very nicely. So how do you do? You can take a material which is little inert in nature, little poor, but it should have very high surface area. So we took the SbF15, and in that we implant the metal oxide, and following the same SbF15 synthesis strategy, and we prepared the different metal containing SbF15 material. So for example, we prepared nickel, manganese, iron, cobalt, and copper containing SbF15, and its surface area varies from 700 to 1000. So you can see that now your copper or your metal is highly dispersed into the mesoporous, but its conductivity will be low. That is the disadvantage. But that can be matched because you have very high surface area, highly dispersed copper or metal oxide supported on the silica. So you will get. So you can see that again you achieve the sensitivity, and that sensitivity you can see in terms of glucose detection. You can see that it is approaching towards 400 micromolar. Here we could able to get around sensitivity. If you see that this calibration curve and sensitivity of different metal, you can see that the copper exhibited the best sensitivity. So we use the copper for the remaining of the application, and we get the copper SbF15 as the best material. Of course, other also, nickel also not that bad. So nickel is also very good. So nickel, copper both are very good for detection of the glucose, and we could reach the higher glucose. You can see that the glucose concentration varied, and we can get even lower sensitivity, lower detection limit when compared to the metal oxide in this case. So one very important thing when we discuss about the glucose sensing, the interfering agent. So we have different kind of interfering species present in the blood. So it should not hamper your detection. So we have interfering species we have detected. We have used dopamine, ascorbic acid, uric acid, and so on. And we have added in higher concentration compared to the glucose. If you see here, in this particular case, we have added 0.5 millimolar and only 0.2 millimolar. You can see the current response changes. So very less interference we could observe in this case. Now, so this, whatever I have shown, in all the cases, we have put metal as a metal oxide. So can I use the same using metal ions? Yes, because zeolite has the capacity to get the metal ions. So you can implant the metal ion by direct ion exchange. But here again, we took the nanocrystalline nature of the material, because if you see that XRD pattern of ZSM5 and nanocrystalline ZSM5, you see the broadening. This broadening actually reflects the nanocrystallinity. In fact, you can see from this, actually this, you see that right hand side, it is the nanocrystalline ZSM5, and this is the normal ZSM5. Normal ZSM5 has micrometer size, and this is, it is nanometer size, but see the size is around 100 nanometer. But here, this size, actually each bigger crystal is made up of a very small crystal. Actually, it is not shown here. I will show you in the next slide when I am going to use the same nano ZSM5, where TM image is shown. It actually has a 10 to 15 nanometer size of this particle. And you can see that pore surface area very high, 560 nanometer compared to the normal ZSM5, which have surface area around 300. So that is what it will exhibit the better activity. You can see that here I have used again the same metal, different metal, but copper exhibited the better activity in terms of sensitivity, and we could achieve up to 10 micromolar detection limit here. So in the glucose, it is possible to go up to 10 micromolar, and you can see that it is hardly interfering with any other kind of uric acid, ascorbic acid, and dopamine. We have added 2 millimolar, but here we only added 0.5 millimolar. So detection is it is not interfering much, and this was actually used for the detection of glucose of the sample available in the pathological lab, and we have used found their result and our result. It is almost matching, somewhat higher in our case, but it's almost matching with the result available from the pathology. So we do not know whether this is correct or that is correct, but we can say that it is a very close relation with result. So now, so far I have discussed about the glucose detection. So glucose detection was based on the single analyte, and just now I have shown that there are several species which is coexisting in the your blood. So can we have, because everybody don't want to give so much blood for each and separate sample. So can I get one time sample, and I can detect all the analytes, whatever we require in one run. So that is possible. So so I just wanted to show here one particular example where we have simultaneously detect ascorbic acid, dopamine, uric acid, and tryptophan coexisting in the same medium. So this is just a presentation. I will just show you that here, if you see that I have incorporated NiCO2O4 on the surface. This is a spinel, and this you can easily see that it is present on the surface. XRDs confirm that, and when you have decorated this NiCO2O4 on the surface area reduced, that is shows in presence of BET isotherm, and you can see that here now you can see that that whatever I was telling, that size of the zeolite crystal. If you see that this crystal, very small crystals are there. Even these are smaller than the spinal crystal. You can see that which is darker in image when compared to the lighter image you see for the zeolite. Zeolite is silica, they will give the lighter, and your metal is darker because they can reflect the light not the better as compared to silica. That is why it is darker in nature. So your NiCO4 is decorated on the surface of the nanocrystalline radium 5, and that is what you can see that it is the highly dispersed way it is decorated in the TM. And you can see that CV result, individual response, you can see that ascorbic acid is obtained at 0.2 volt, dopamine observed around 0.35 volt, your uric acid absorbed around 0.6, and tryptophan is absorbed around 0.8. So since they are observed at different potential, so it means that if you all of them if you put in one solution, it is possible to distinguishingly determine their concentration. So what we did, first we did the single detection, 1 micromolar to 1200 micromolar in case of ascorbic acid. For different analyte, it has different range, but mostly it goes up to 1000 micromolar. And then in the simultaneous run, you can see that you can easily distinguish all four, and you can easily calibrate all the four, and you can say that what concentration is present in one go. So that is what the advantage of using electrochemical sensing technique, where you can use all of the analyte is actually oxidizing, and you can able to get the response current corresponding to each analyte at different potential, and you can easily say that what is the concentration from the calibration curve. And you can see that we have when you have coated on nano-ZSM5, the sensitivity is very high. If you take normal material, NiCO4 alone, it has low sensitivity. Only ZSM5, it has low sensitivity. In fact, normal ZSM5 even lower sensitivity. So when you have implanted your NiCO4 on the surface of nano-ZSM5, it exhibited the better sensitivity. That is what this was one of the work which it shows the simultaneous detection of all four analytes. Now, this is very important in terms of Punjab. because we and especially those who are working on the pesticides, because a large amount of pesticides are used in the agriculture and it meets with the water body, so it contaminates, and smaller concentration plays very important role, because you know that the small concentration interferes to the acetylcholine, and you know that acetylcholine is a neurotransmitter. Okay, so this is a neurotransmitter. It can hamper the brain, it can hamper the nervous system, if its concentration is large. So you need to determine the exact concentration of acetylcholine, because it can lead to Alzheimer's disease and so many other diseases. Okay, so organophosphate actually it interferes with the acetylcholine esterase which is present in your body, that because it will accumulate more of acetylcholine, and that is problem with the nervous system. So one has to minimize, or one has to regularly monitor the concentration of acetylcholine present in the blood. So how to do? So what we did, we prepare polyethylene zeolite nanocomposite. Zeolite is non-porous. Zeolite is porous, but it doesn't have good conductivity. That is why we have loaded polyethylene onto the surface, so it makes more conductivity. And then we have used, actually I will skip it because we have used square wave ampermetric techniques, square wave voltammetric technique at pH 7.4 in order to detect that. I will show you, you will be able to understand in better way when I am presenting in the next slide. Actually, if you see that if you don't use acetylcholine, you don't have any response current. But once you use acetylcholine, you get the response current. Actually, this is because of the hydrolysis of acetylcholine, which give you acetylcholine and acetic acid. That acetic acid is protonating the polyethylene. That is why you are getting the response current. And if you see that if you are taking normal polyethylene, you have very low sensitivity. Once when you are using polyethylene supported on nanodeterm 5, you have very high sensitivity. That is what we have used this one. So this is the mechanism how it is operating. We have first prepared the polyethylene supported on nanodeterm 5, and then it is drop costed. Enzyme is entrapped, and then when you use the enzyme, it hydrolyzes. Actually, it give you the choline and acetic acid, and this acetic acid is actually protonating this polyethylene, and then you are observing this peak. So if the acetic acid is not produced, then polyethylene is not protonated, and then the response current will not observe. So if this process, this hydrolysis process is hampered, then this current response will go down, and that will give you the information about the pesticide, because pesticides actually hamper the acetylcholine hydrolysis. So that is what is happening. So once you add your, for example, in this particular site, I have shown the monocrotopos is one pesticide. When you use a different concentration, you can see that its concentration is decreasing when you increase the concentration of that organophosphate monocrotopos. So in this particular case, when the enzyme was entrapped into the porous mesoporous polyethylene present on the surface, then we could achieve the sensitivity, limit of detection is 0.1 ppb. Please note that this pesticides is actually present in our water bodies in very, very low concentration. So actually aim is to detect very low concentration. So what we did another study in which we could achieve the sensitivity up to 0.01 ppb. So what we did, we again, rather than taking nanodeterm 5, we have already implanted titanium into it, because titanium will oxidize it. How it will do? Here you can see that it formed now in the previous case it was entrapped. Here it is anchored onto the surface. So here it is more covalently bonded. So leaching will not be there. It is more strongly bonded as compared to in the previous cases. Okay, so that is what is the one advantage. And the second thing is that here the titanium is present. So actually titanium is oxidizing that acetylcholine, and it is reducing to titanium 3+, which further can oxidize to titanium 4+ by applying the potential. That is what it is happening. So if you see that this is the mechanism, when you have the acetylcholine, it will hydrolyze, it will give you thiocholine. This thiocholine, in presence of titanium, it will form the bis-thiocholine. This dithio-bis-choline is give you the response current. So this is actually, in this process, titanium is reduced to titanium 3+, and titanium 3+ can come back to titanium 4+ just by reversing the potential. So that is how if you see that the response current, if you see that the nano titanium silicate, in case of B, you have very good response current. And when you do the same thing without the nano titanium silicate, if you have only titanium silicate, the response current was lower. So that is what. And how it is interfering your organophosphate? Actually, this is your acetylcholine enzyme, which has the serine 200 OH group, and it also has the 440 histidine moiety. They are having some interaction with that. That interaction is actually cleaved by these organophosphates. So this organophosphate react with the serine 2 OH moiety, and it forms this kind of complex, and that is interfering the hydrolysis of this particular species, and that is what the inhibition is taking place. And this was done with, and you can achieve the sensitivity, very high sensitivity you can achieve in this particular case. And actually in this case, we could get the detection of 0.01 ppb. We did the 4 organophosphate, malathione, methyl parathione, monochrotopaz, and dichlorose. All the 4 organophosphate we have detected, and its lower detection limit actually found in the range of 0.01 to 0.02. You can see here in case of malathion, I have shown here how its sensitivity is decreasing, your current is decreasing. Actually, current is decreasing means hydrolysis is not happening, means acetylcholine is not forming. That is why the current is decreasing. So this is what, so it is a kind of, you can say that is an indirect detection. So indirect detection presence of acetylcholine esterase enzyme. So enzyme is required. Without enzyme, it is not possible. In body also, that acetylcholine esterase enzyme is also playing a role. That is what we require, that to be interact into that system. And then titanium plays an external role to increase the sensitivity. That is what we could able to get. If you see that LOD, we found that 0.01, 0.02, 0.01, and 0.01 for the malathion, methyl parathion, and monochromatose and dichlorose. So this was we could able to achieve with titanium containing materials. So I will give you another example in our body. That is also why it is important, because it is antioxidant, and if you do not have the required concentration of cysteine present in the body, then it gives a lot of problem, because you have always oxidized form of the cysteine present in body. So we have both cysteine, and glutathione. Both are present. Okay, so it is just into the reduced state or oxidized state. So actually the glutathione is actually synthesized by the cysteine, and these are not available in the food supplement. So you have to have it. Otherwise, if your imbalance is there, then it will be a problem. So because the oxidative stress will provide an increase in GCS ratio will provide the oxidative stress. So that will hamper so many metabolism in your system, and that will give you a lot of problem. So that is why it is very important for the simultaneous detection of pre-GCH and the oxidized GSS species both together. Otherwise, you will not be able to know the exact concentration. So that is what we did. Our aim was to detect both of them simultaneously. So what we did, we developed a gold nanoparticle supported nanojet sulfide. So if you can see that the XRD shows that the gold nanoparticle has formed onto the surface, and after loading this gold nanoparticle, the surface area is slightly reduced. You can see that how we have prepared this. We have started with nanojet sulfide. First, we have functionalized with amine group. Then we have protonated it. Then gold was added so that it can gold can be protected for the aggregation. And once you do that, add to the glucose. What is that? Your GC electrode. Then you can get the simultaneous detection of cysteine as well as GCH both together. So this is, you can see the very nice picture how the glucose is how the gold nanoparticle is surrounded by the spherical nanojet sulfide. So it has a diameter of around 3 to 5 nanometer of gold nanoparticle. So how it is happening? What is the mechanism which is operating? You can see that cysteine and glutathione both are oxidizing to give you SS bond, okay, in presence of gold. So gold is actually oxidizing to AU2O3, which can be reversed by reversing the potential. So if you see that this is oxidation which is happening, and the oxidation current in case of cysteine, it is observed around 0.34, and in case of glutathione, it is observed around 0.6. So it means that one can detect simultaneously. So we can see that we have detected simultaneously cysteine and glutathione concentration, because glutathione is formed from cysteine. So you need to know the concentration of cysteine and glutathione present, free glutathione present in the body. So that will provide the doctor to give you the information that what kind of supplement you should take, whether you should take more in concentration or low in concentration, depending upon the free cysteine and free GCS present in your blood serum. So that's the information you can get it from this. And if you see that nanodesam 5 without gold was very low sensitive, wherever when you have the gold nanoparticle 0.58%, very less amount of gold was added, then it has very good sensitivity. And it has a large number of amino acid. We have tried to study the interference study. It has not shown any interference for such kind of amino acids. Even glucose and ascorbic acid, dopamine and uric acid, it did not show any interference. And then I am coming to maybe last two things, which is based on the water molecule, whatever the inorganic and organic things present in the water body, especially the toxic heavy metal ion. For example, cadmium, lead, arsenic, and mercury. So that is a kind of a thing which is present in our body, which is present in the water bodies, and we need to detect them very precisely. And these are also present in very, very low concentration. And if the concentration increase little bit more, it will going to affect our body huge, because it is going to affect the respiratory action. It is going to interfere the citric acid cycle. It is going to influence the bone of our body. So everything is influenced because of these toxic metals. So one has to drink water which doesn't have this kind of, or it has the concentration very, very low. So this is prescribed limit, that is 3 ppb, 10 ppb, 10 ppb, and 6 ppb, which is described by the WHO. Okay, so that is what. So one has to monitor their concentration very carefully. So what we have done, we have prepared the hydroxyapatite. Hydroxyapatite, you know that hydroxyapatite, your bone is actually made up of hydroxyapatite. Hydroxyapatite is actually calcium phosphate. Okay, so what we did, actually we grown this calcium phosphate hydroxyapatite. Actually this work we did it for something else. We wanted to grow a material which can be used for the bone implant, okay, using the zeolite. So what we did, first we took the zeolite, we implant silver as an ion. If you don't add silver, hydroxyapatite will not grow. So if you take the silver containing nanodesam 5 and if you put into the SBF, means simulated body fluid, means which have all metal ion, which is responsible for the growth of the bone, because you know that suppose your bone is healing in your body itself. Why it is healing? Because your SBF is present in your body. So that itself heals the bone. Okay, only one you have to give a perfect orientation. So that it can growth can take place and it can connect the broken bone. So that is why people also use the implant. So here we wanted to use an implant which can help in the growth of the hydroxyapatite and that can connect the bone. That is what our aim was. So we have prepared this hydroxyapatite containing nanodesam 5, and you can see that initially it is silver nanodesam 5. It doesn't have any hydroxyapatite. When we have put for 10 days, the hydroxyapatite have been grown, and 20 days, large amount of hydroxyapatite have been grown. I will show you in the next slide about SCM and TM. You can easily see that the hydroxyapatite has been grown, and you can see that the surface area has been reduced. You can see that this is the SCM, silver nanodesam 5. You have the very spherical morphology. You can see that something is forming after 10 days, and after 20 days you can see the large number of crystals of different size. You can see that you cannot see very clearly in the SCM, but you can definitely see in terms of in the TEM, because you see that this is the very small crystal which is actually hydroxyapatite, and the larger spherical size which is actually your jadesam 5, silver containing jadesam 5. So this is your jadesam 5 and this is your hydroxyapatite which is grown. So this is the TEM image which shows that hydroxyapatite has been grown, and we have used this material for the sensing of this all four metal ion. So actually these all metal ion present in different pH. So that is what we have to adopt a particular pH to get into these metal ion. We prepared a solution. You can see that. And here how we did it, actually this is very important. Here we did it by square wave techniques. We have used it, and what we have done first, your metal ion is actually present inside the solution. So we have to actually deposit those metal ion on the support. So we have to give the deposition current, then it will deposit, and then we have to oxidize it, means strip it, whatever the metal which is deposited onto the support or onto your electrode, that has to be stripped. So that stripping process is the reoxidation of this happen. So because of that, we can able to detect the amount of metal present in the solution. So if you can see that the concentration of cadmium, lead, arsenic and mercury separately, individually first we have done, you can see that it's nicely, you can see the detection, and then we have it is not possible to detect all of them in one go because their existence into a particular pH. So we have done at two different pH. One we have done at pH 5, another one we have done at pH 7. Because pH 7 we have done for arsenic and mercury, and pH 5 is present in cadmium and lead. So that is what we could able to get, and sensitivity is very, very good in this particular case, and we got the sensitivity of 0.1, 0.1 and 0.2 and 0.2 ppb for this metal. So you can actually detect in very, very low concentration of this metal ion present into the water body. So this is what we have detect with different metal ions. You can see that different metal ion, and these are the different kind of electrodes. So if you have still hydroxyapatite containing silver nanosulfide, then only it has high sensitivity. If you only take silver nanosulfide, it has low sensitivity. Or if you take silver nanoparticle decorated on normal nanosulfide, then also it's low sensitivity. That is what it has achieved high sensitivity when you have both silver nanoparticle as well as hydroxyapatite together. So what is the important thing here, that you require the high absorption ability of the hydroxyapatite, you require the intercrystalline mesoporosity present in the nanosulfide, you require the good conductivity because of silver ion present, and all these things contributing towards the high sensitivity and good LOD for this material. This is the last topic I am going to discuss. Then I will stop it here. Then I will take up questions from the audience. And here we tried the same method to detect the hydrogen and phenyl hydrogen. Actually, the hydrogen and phenyl halogen are present. Is large number of molecules are there. A large number of industry are using these two molecules as an explosive, even rocket propellant, in many places. It is also used as in pesticide industry. So they are also coming to the water body, and they also influence the nervous system and so on. That is why it is important to detect simultaneously these two. Again, we use the same electrochemical techniques to detect this, and again it is based on the oxidation of these species, because hydrogen can give you nitrogen and electron will produce. Phenyl halogen will give you diazetyl benzene and electron will. So this number of electrons coming out will give you the sensitivity of the particular system. So if you see that I have copper nanoparticle was decorated on polynano. The why polyaniline always I take, because it gives you more conductivity. That is why polyaniline is taken. Otherwise, nanosulfide has very low conductivity. So in order to get better conductivity, polyaniline was coated on the surface. Then copper nanoparticle was decorated. We can see that you can see that the copper nanoparticle was decorated on the polyaniline. If you see the first slide, the polyaniline also you can see, and nanosulfide also you can see. In the larger view, higher magnification, you can see that nanoparticle. So that's what the magnification wise you can see the different kind of system present within the hybrid material. And then this has been used for the detection. You can see that the Bayer system, when you do not have anything, you don't have any oxidation current, but in the right hand side you have oxidation current corresponding to the hydrogen and phenyl halogen at different potential. You can see that one is observed at 0.4, another one is observed at 0.6. So it means that it is possible to simultaneously detect them. That is why first we did the individual, and we monitored its linear range and detection limit. And once we did the simultaneous, you can also see that very distinguished oxidation current you can observe at two different potential. So you can simultaneously detect their response, and that is also you can detect at very low detection limit. And you can see that we have prepared copper nanoparticle polyaniline supporting mechanism 5, and then without polyaniline and only polyaniline, and all those things we have varied. And finally what we obtained, that when it is loaded on polyaniline GeSSM 5 copper nanoparticle loaded, it has achieved the high sensitivity and LOD. That is what we achieved. So finally what I can conclude is that in order to introduce the porosity in a material, you require a template. Either the kind of template you choose, you can get a different kind of porous material. Different kind of analyte, you require a different kind of active site. So that's what I showed, that some case I use spinel, some case I use metal oxide, some case I use metal ion, some case I use the metal nanoparticle. And that too different. For some time I use silver, sometime I use gold, sometime I use copper, because different metal will have different activity and selectivity. So we have actually, is not that I have only shown the success story. There are very unsuccess stories, is difficult, we have not presented. So we have very different metal, we have very different source, we have very different conductive support, but our aim was to develop cheap, economical and robust material. That is why most often we develop on the zeolites and metal oxide based system. Okay, and once you have the large external surface area, you can tailor its surface functionalized site, and then you can entrap your biomolecule. For example, in case of your acetylcholine esterase, we can either entrap or you covalently anchored. It's depend upon you what you want. So that can be achieved when you take different kind of porosity and different kind of surface site. And then based on all these factors, you can actually get the optimum porosity, optimum conductivity, and optimum adsorptionability of the different analyte, which can interact with the support, and that is responsible for the sensing of various metal ion as well as inorganic and organic species present in water body as well as pathological. So I have actually in this talk, what I have tried to show various biomolecule, organic molecule present in water and present in the other system. I tried to discuss everything very clearly. So that is what through this presentation I tried to summarize our work which we have done up to 2015. So 2015-16 I have, these are my group. So actually these are the alumni. These 5 students have already graduated. Actually the work which I have presented is actually mostly the Balvinder Kaur work and Anu Pratap work. Remaining all, these are my current students. They are working on different aspects. Now we are not actually working on sensing. We have moved up forward. Now we are mostly working on energy applications, either electrochemical or photochemical or conventional method. So all these work students who are working, none of them at present are working on the sensing application. All of them are working on because now more emphasis is given on energy system. That is what we are working on. And these are the funding agency. They have been given a lot of fund to carry out this work. So I thank them, and I thank the organizers and all of you for listening patiently. And if you have any question, I will be very thankful and very means I will try to address and try to explain. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Rajendra Srivastava, for this very informative and very this important talk on the sensors and basically in catalysis and relation with the sensors. And yes. I will check the questions. So if the participants have the questions. So let me move to. Yeah, this question, I think first question is from Manisha Sharon. So what is the meaning of CO in CO precipitation method? Please explain.
CO
in CO precipitation.
Or the co-precipitation. Okay.
Okay.
Okay, this is there is a difference between precipitation and co-precipitation method.
Okay, okay.
Yeah. So precipitation method is what happened. Suppose if you want to have only one particular metal ion to precipitate, so then you have precipitation method. Co-precipitation method is very important because what happened, you are trying to precipitate two metal ions together. So two metal ions will have different hydrolysis rate. They will have different hydrolysis rate. So precipitation can be sequential. Or, so what will happen? They will not simultaneously precipitate. So what you can do, you have to have a strategy to precipitate them simultaneously by increasing the pH. Okay, suppose one metal is precipitating at pH 5, another metal is precipitating at pH 6, or if I say pH 9 and 10. So if I am taking a solution of pH 9 or pH 9.5, then only one metal will precipitate. The other metal will not precipitate. But if I take the pH of, let's say, 10 or 10.5 or even 11, so if I take the pH 11, all the metal will precipitate simultaneously. So you will get the simultaneous co-precipitation. So then only you can have the interconnection between one metal with other metal. Otherwise, what will happen? You will have a core shell. Suppose somebody wants core shell morphology. So in that case, what happens? You can have a sequential precipitation. So what happens? First, you have already precipitated one, and then top of that, the another one will precipitate. So depending upon your requirement, what you want, what kind of system you want to develop, you can tailor the sequence of addition, hydrolysis rate of the metal precursor. In fact, you know, if you take the metal nitrate, if you take the metal acetate, their hydrolysis rate is going to be different. So what happened, in order to match the hydrolysis rate, one you can take at nitrate, one you can take at a different precursor. So you can match the hydrolysis rate. So it is very important, in order to develop a material, you have to check the precursor, their hydrolysis rate, and what kind of material you are looking for. Are you are looking for a kind of material which is bonded together, either in terms of small bonding or kind of a bonding, or you want a core cell. So depending upon your requirement, you can tailor your synthesis, your co-precipitation strategy. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, sir. Now I am moving to the another question. This question is from Venkat Ratnam. His question is, dear sir, suggest a good method used to coat the material on working electrode for sensing other than a drop cast method.
Yeah, so what we did, I will tell you, actually in most of our work, which we have done, in whatever I have shown, mostly we have done in glassy carbon electrode. But for energy application, what we have done, we have also done on carbon paste electrode. So what we have done, that we have we have a kind of a tube in which the carbon was there, and then we have loaded material into particular proportion. That is one thing which we have done in case of energy application, because that you can also do by making the polymer of those material, provided this material should be stable in nature in that particular polymer, that particular temperature. So you have a kind of a pressing technique through which you can make a thin film of those materials. So those things you can prepare. But again, in this process, it is possible that you will be losing some of the activity, because this work what we have done at that time, we were not having all those techniques with us. Even today, we don't have all those techniques, because we are not very interested to go forward in terms of electrochemical application, in terms of sensing application. We have moved forward toward energy application. So now we are mostly working on fuel cell and hydrogen, this supercapacitor work. That work we are working mostly on, again, mostly based on metal oxide and metal based system. So one can, depending upon this thing, you can develop. That is what I said in my first initial slide, that these materials have a capability to be pressed, hard pressed. They can be made polymer. They can be not polymer. They can be made thin film and so on, without losing their intrinsic activity. That is possible with this kind of material. But with some other material, for example, polyaniline and all, it is difficult. You can definitely grow polyaniline on a substrate. You can grow that. That is possible. But once you press the polyaniline, it may, at high temperature, it may lose its conductivity. It may lose its activity. But porosity definitely is going to be lost. So all those things is not, so it depends what you want, and accordingly you have to choose appropriate method for the fabrication of your electrodes.
Yeah, thank you, sir. So there's a lot of appreciation for you. In between, I am not going through that. Like, this is a wonderful talk, very good talk, excellent, informative talk. So many participants. So that means participants are really liking your talk. I am just moving to the other question quickly.
Yes.
So this is again from Venkat Ratnam. Is there any low-cost material available as a binder other than Nafion?
Yes, so this is a very, very good question. Actually, I will tell you that, in fact, fuel cell or even sensing applications, wherever people are using Nafion is a big problem, because, you know, we get Nafion 50 ml, 5-8%, from Elbridge we get 20,000 rupees or so. Is very, very costly. Yes, people are working on, we have not worked on, we have worked on ionic liquid for catalysis, but what we can develop, we can definitely, people are working hard to develop the membrane or the Nafion substituent using based on ionic liquid, because ionic liquid can be similar conductivity, can be similar stability as the Nafion, you can make it. So people are working. So if you want to develop substituent of the Nafion, one can think of developing the fluorinated based ionic liquid, in which you have a capability to incorporate SO3H group as the Nafion has. So people are actually really working on it. We have not worked, but if you want to develop low cost, that is the alternative. One can develop the low cost membrane similar to Nafion, but it will take time. So one can work on. In fact, some of the audience, if they are interested and they want to work on Nafion, they can work, because what happened, you need to measure the conductivity, you need to measure so many other parameters, so that has to be matched with the Nafion. So there's altogether different study, but someone is interested that I can collaborate, because I am expertise in synthesis of the ionic liquid, so that I can means I can offer my expertise in that way.
Thank you, sir. Sir, we have more questions. Also, I have my own questions. So maybe I will just ask 1 or 2 more questions from the participants. I will not ask my question. I will ask later. So I will take 2 more questions. Can we make 3D nanostructures using nanozeolite?
Yes. So it is a last. Actually, I did not present the last one, where recently 2019 we have published a paper in which what we have developed, our aim was actually in terms of catalysis, not in terms of sensing. Our aim was to develop interconnected micro, meso, and macro. So that is what we were trying to develop. So we got them, because porosity is more important for us rather than the dimensionality. Okay. So I am not aware whether the 3-dimensional structure, but all these materials are actually 3-dimensional in nature. Okay, all these materials are actually 3-dimensional, because it has a growth in all the X, Y, Z axis. Okay, so it all actually zeolites are 3-dimensional. So what we develop, we try to reduce the thickness of the zeolite in one particular direction. That is what is called the nanosheet zeolite. Okay, so but it is oriented in all the 3 directions. Okay, so it is there in X, Y, Z in all the 3 directions. It's actually the 3-dimensional material. But what we try to reduce the thickness in one particular direction, so that the diffusion path is improved and the porosity is improved. So that is what our aim is. Okay. So yeah. So I think this will answer the question what I wanted to answer. Yeah.
Okay, sir. Okay, sir. Yeah. I think we are we taken a lot more time than you. Thank you. Maybe participants have more questions. They can write to you directly.
Please don't hesitate to write to me. I will try to answer your question as much as possible. And if some of you, I could through this platform, I can share that I am very much interested in terms of electrochemical sensor. But at present, my focus is somewhere different. But some of you, if you are interested in development of electrochemical sensor, and if you need a input in terms of material development, I am very happy to do it, and I can collaborate with you. Even I can offer, without collaboration, offer my assistant if any is required. So if you have any such suggestion or such thing, we have certain facility. We can also do here some work. Your student can also come and do some work. So all the possibility through that platform I can offer, and anyone is interested, please write to me. It will take some time to understand each other, and definitely if 1 or 2 outcomes will come out, I think this platform will be useful for all of us actually. Yes.
Yeah. So we thank you, sir, for this wonderful presentation, and then this kind of compliments we see in the chat box, and the question and the interaction, that was really wonderful. And I hope the participant really learned something new and from your wide experience in catalysis and then using in the sensors. So I hope that and we believe that the participant really will learn and they will use in their teaching and research as well. And some of the participants, as you are already interacting about their research, and you already told them that you are open for the collaboration and any other kind of help. So yeah, so this participant, this will be a very good opportunity for you. So let's thank the speaker now. So sir, thank you very much for accepting our request for this particular program and this lecture. And this was really wonderful. Thank you again. Thank you, sir.
Okay. Thank you very much.